Okay, so given what you were saying before about Varna and Jati being aptitudes and in relation to what you actually do, so the labels aren't so much that important then? It's more the way you are as a person or what you do and finding someone who fits with that, right? Rather than has the right label, the appropriate matching label.
Absolutely right. All of the scriptures support that point of view.
We've also had another text in saying marriage is more to do with blood group and family relationship. What do you think about that?
Well, there is an interesting angle to this as well. And just to wrap up what we were saying about similarities, right? Families do have habits as well. Culture is in pockets, isn't it? The culture of an educated family is different to the culture of a family who are working in a manual environment.
Definitely.
Right? And for the youngsters out there who have yet to embark on the most incredible journey of life of marriage, right? you guys are going to come to a time when I suspect similarities are going to be of real use. Right?
Oh, definitely.
There are enough differences between a man and a woman to try and reconcile a happy married life together. And the more differences that exist, they can be also a cause for a lack of understanding, a lack of accommodation, and friction as well. So the more similar the templates of how people have grown up, I think that adds to a marriage. And so maybe that's one reason why groups of people look for similar-minded people. That's different to being prejudiced.
So where does blood group come into all of this? Because it sounds very reasonable to find someone who matches and fits. It's less stuff to sort out once you're a pair, right? If you both agree on things already, there's less work to be done.
Because historically, were Varnas based on blood groups?
No,
I read that somewhere as well. I don't know if that's another myth or there's some logic behind it.
Here's something for everyone to look and do some research for themselves, right? If you've got horoscopes, have a look in the horoscopes, and no matter who you are, no matter which jati or varna or caste you're born into, on an Indian astrological horoscope, it actually identifies Varun, and it will say there what your aptitude is.
Okay, so even if your surnames are different, if you're both compatible with the horoscope, then that's a different story.
Absolutely right.
Oh, that's interesting.
And in the old structures, it actually says that people are free to move up and down the marriage structures according to trying to preserve wisdom and knowledge and whatever has been gained by society. If you do it the other way around, so that society is basically getting a net loss of its accumulated understanding and knowledge with each marriage and each generation, then that's not a good thing. So there are some ideas in there which are designed to try and help preserve all of the cultural, what do you call it these days? Intellectual capital? Is that the phrase that the young guys are bandying around these days?
About that.
Okay, but we do. In the Indian system, there is a huge amount of intellectual capital.
Okay.
And the idea is to try and make sure that all the relationships give happiness to everyone who's involved in the relationships, both families. Remember, when two people get together, two families are also getting together.
Yes.
And can you imagine the potential difficulties in just something as simple as a vegetarian family managing a relationship with a non-vegetarian family?
Yeah.
Right?
I can imagine, being vegetarian, I can imagine the difficulties one would get into.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
Yeah.
So those are also very, very important parts of how this works.
So that's interesting. So it's a fluid structure. It's not just based on surnames. That's a huge myth that we've dispelled there.
Absolutely right.
And it should be based on actions, not just because someone's surname says they're a Brahmin, but they eat meat and they do bad things. Or
yeah, and I have yet to come across any of the scriptures which actually support prejudice. It's fundamentally flawed. Every ounce of reason in this reasonable conversation, right, shouts, doesn't it? It says, hang on, prejudice is not good.
Definitely.
Right.
And this is what the amendment to the bill is trying to introduce as well, to eliminate prejudice.
Well, this is what it's being touted as. I think this is what it's being publicised as. But if you look at the literature and the notes which back it, there is actually the possibility that this is an assault on the way in which the Indian society has been architected. And there are a lot of commentators who are saying that, hang on, behind this there is nothing other than a conversion agenda. That the reason that India has never been completely converted is because the structure of Varun and Jati, that there is knowledge which is what identifies the Indian hierarchy and the Indian identity, and that knowledge is preserved by people in these castes, in these Varans.
Okay.
So a father is teaching his son meditation and mantras and Vedas from an early age.
Yep. Yeah.
And if his son has the aptitude for it, then that knowledge is being encapsulated and preserved and passed on. The knowledge of yoga, how many people are now loving yoga?
Yep.
Yeah?
I myself love yoga after having taken it up recently.
Excellent. That was a plug for yoga practitioners everywhere. I think more people could do with doing more and more yoga. But that knowledge would have been lost if it had been dissolved and allowed to just dissipate and disappear. If there hadn't been some group of people who were coming together and preserving it generation after generation.
Okay, so the fact is that India has been invaded so many times. Are you suggesting that this is why all the ancient traditions and practices haven't been, gone away, or people haven't taken on the invaders?
Yeah, this is it's part of human nature, isn't it? What you grow up with is it becomes part of you, and then you preserve it. You try and protect it. And just look at all of the religious wars going on all around the world, where people are trying to protect what they think their religion or their society or their culture has always preserved. And it's an inherent part. If you want to preserve something, give it to people as part of their religion. And that's the last thing they will give up. They will fight to the death often just to protect something that has been given to them as their religion.
Definitely. I mean, we just got a text in from Mr. Sharma. He said it's quite depressing that caste is being discussed in Parliament as the whole world looks to the UK as a reasonable voice. It's quite true, actually. The whole world will be watching the UK Parliament, and they'll be thinking, wow, Hindus are discriminating, they're being prejudiced, they've got this whole caste system. And that goes to what you were saying earlier, that there is a kind of hidden agenda behind it all.
It would be interesting to see what impact this would actually have in India. I mean, would you think the impact would be there?
Both wonderful questions, and Mr. Sharma's question is really quite relevant as well. If anybody wants to have a look and see what was actually said by the House of Lords, it's on YouTube, and I think if you just do a search for NCHT, you'll find that these guys have got on their website a recording of what the actual dialogue and the communications and the discussion in the House of Lords was. And it is stunning. As I said, a Sikh gentleman, Lord Singh, actually stood up and said that caste prejudice is an inherent part of Hinduism.
Well, that's terrible.
Right?
You know, the thing that gets me here is everyone who seems to be talking about Hinduism doesn't actually seem to be a Hindu. I would be very reluctant to make any judgments about other religions.
Definitely.
And it's quite disheartening that these people are so confidently going out there and telling us about our religion.
Well, it's funny. I'm going to mention something. I was invited to Lambeth Palace to have this conversation, and I said to one of the Christian bishops there, I said, do you know how uncomfortable it is to be the object of somebody else's dissection at the dining table? I said, we wouldn't dream of doing this to your tradition, your religion. I said, it's just basically rude. It's an indecent thing. You don't invite somebody into your home as a guest and then dissect them at the dining table. And yet, all of you seem to spend so much time and energy on exploring the Hindu identity and the Hindu culture and the Hindu this and the Hindu that, and then telling us what it all is. Come on, guys, we need to grow up and move beyond this.
Well, I think a part of that actually might be related to one of the texts we received earlier.
Yeah, from Simon, that we're picked on because...
About Hindus being easy targets. I think part of the problem is to do with us as well, Hindus sometimes. I think we often accept other people's definitions. And that's what seems to have gone on with this whole House of Lords parliamentary debate. It's because we're not sure what actually Hinduism is that we just go along with what's told to us.
I think this is a really important point, especially for the next generation, right? The identity that a generation has, you pick it up from the people who are telling you about what it is to be a Hindu. And one of the lies that has been perpetrated and enforced on so many people is that Hindus are pacifist.
Yeah.
Okay, that no matter what happens, you mustn't raise your voice, you mustn't fight back. And I think it's the old story about the snake who wanted to become enlightened is really relevant here. Have you heard the story about the snake?
Nope.
Okay, well, a sage was passing by, and he saw the snake, and the snake says to the saint, I want to become enlightened. And the saint says to him, well, you must become a creature of tranquility and peace.
Okay.
And so the snake becomes a creature of tranquility and peace. A few years later, the same sage is passing through the same village, and he sees a battered and bruised enormous snake lying by the side of the road, and he says to him, what on earth's going on with what happened? And he said, well, I stopped biting people, I stopped shouting at people, I stopped hissing at people, and now even the boys in the street throw stones at me. And I think that's part of what the Hindu experience has become.
It's true. If you let people walk all over you, they will, and Hindus should stand up. And I was just going to ask, if there are listeners out there who are enraged by what's been happening in Parliament and the things they've been saying, how can they join the campaign and get involved, or can they not because of parliamentary privilege?
No, it's a very active campaign at the moment, and there are many organisations who are really leading the way. If anybody wants to get involved, I'd suggest they get in touch with NuSound Radio, get in touch with you directly, Or alternatively, one of the most active groups who have been doing the work on this and who have got a lot of background material is the National Council of Hindu Temples.
Right.
And if you check out their website, nchtuk.org, there are videos on there, there are recordings of what the Lords were actually saying, what our MPs have said. It's all up there, and you can get in touch with these guys, and they too will help you get involved and raise the profile. So it's a very live debate at this moment.
Well, it's good to hear. We've just had a text in from Bharat who says beating Hindus seems to be the flavour of the world. And I guess with the whole political situation in India and what's happening and what happened with poor Swami Ramdev when he came here, I think one can kind of agree with him to some extent.
I think this whole pacifism thing is a big part of that problem, right? You know, we have Gandhiji as one of our people who everyone looks up to. And so I think pacifism and Hinduism get conflated.
Yeah.
And, you know, people always quote the Gita saying it's important to be peaceful and this, that, the other, forgetting that the Gita is actually on a battlefield itself.
Exactly. I think lots of people forget that.
No, it's true. And a reasonable conclusion, right, would be to understand that it's perfectly fine to be passive, pacific, calm, wise and everything else. But there is a requirement that a wiser person defend wisdom. Right?
Definitely.
It's a fundamental failing to actually allow someone to exterminate you just to prove the point of how wise you are. Okay?
It defeats the object of being wise in the first place.
So I think there's a requirement, really. Everyone who's involved in preserving what's right and reasonable needs to get involved and say, actually, here's the limit. This is beyond reasonable, and we're not going to allow this to happen. There's a democratic environment in this country at the moment, and we should all participate in it and contribute to it. I think not complain quite so much, guys. We need to get involved and make it happen ourselves.
Definitely, because if we're involved in these political processes, then it's only then that we can, you know, raise awareness and dispel all these myths that people have, such as, you know, caste prejudice is inherent in Hinduism, and it's something that apparently all Hindus practice, which actually, even their own research, even the parliamentary own research, said it didn't. It wasn't actually Hindus at all, but somehow Hindus came into the equation and were picked on.
Yeah. And it is surprising what's happened. Even the word discrimination has changed. Once upon a time, the word discrimination was a good thing. Human beings used to discriminate between what was good and what was bad. You know, when you get dressed in the morning, you discriminate by choosing what colours fit and what colours don't.
Okay.
So discrimination is a good word. And yet, only a few years ago, a meaning of it appeared in English language, and discrimination became a bad word.
Okay.
So we now have got one word which has got a good meaning and a bad meaning. And this is part of what's been going on. The whole dialogue and the vocabulary has been manipulated to try and present Hindus are caste prejudiced and bad people. They can't look after their own affairs, and so we're going to legislate to preserve a minority who are being who are on the recipients of prejudice.
It's actually quite interesting how it was a bishop that brought out this debate about caste, and it wasn't actually a Dalit or someone who was perceived to be a lower caste or face discrimination from anyone else.
I think, well, this is interesting because bishops and lords and the Queen are all examples of hereditary privilege, right? Which is what caste apparently is all about.
Exactly.
They really have gotten themselves into a bit of a difficult situation. There is a wonderful thing that has happened as a result of all of this. I think more Hindus than ever before are now beginning to pay attention to how they're perceived in this country.
Definitely.
And also are becoming quite encouraged to get involved in the process. There is a process whereby Hindus, I think, have got a huge contribution to make. We've made it in so many other areas, and the political process is actually wide open. The political process really wants Hindus to get involved and say, well, this is right and this is wrong. I don't know whether you've noticed, but David Cameron and the other political parties are very actively recruiting and trying to establish good links now with the Hindu and Indian community.
Definitely, there's an all-parliamentary party group now for Hindus in the House of Parliament, which is a great step. So hopefully the voice of reason within that group will prevail and will dispel all these myths, which we've been trying to do today.
So hopefully we've had a reasonable conversation. Have we got a reasonable conclusion?
I think so. So discrimination, if taken in the right way, is not actually bad. There's nothing wrong with identifying yourself as belonging to a group of people.
Absolutely.
But by putting other groups down and being prejudiced against other groups, that's where the problems creep in.
I think so.
And something we didn't touch on was music videos and how songs are putting other people down at the expense of a certain group of people.
Well, I think, Vivek, what you've just said is really right. There's nothing wrong in people celebrating their heritage and their culture. But what's wrong is putting other people down to make yourself feel good. And I think that's where the prejudice aspect comes in.
Definitely. Well, to all our viewers who've been listening, we hope you've learnt a lot for this past hour, and we hope it's been an engaging conversation for you, and a lot of myths about caste have been dispelled, and what caste actually means and where it comes from. And next week we'll be talking about conversion. So please do text in, tweet. Our email address is info@nusoundradio.com.
And we look forward to having another reasonable conversation very soon.